Welcome back, everybody. I'm Michael Foley, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to do a cross choke from closed guard in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So for this video, I'm bringing in my student, Will. Will's been with me 20 years this month, so he was one of the first people to register when we opened up this academy in St. John's, and he's been with me ever since. Let's look at the choke itself before we put it in context to closed guard. What I want to do is I want to open up my partner's collar. One hand goes in on one side nice and deep. The other hand goes in on the other side nice and deep. And something you got to keep in mind here is I'm using this part of my wrist right here, so the bone on the top of my wrist, and I want to line it up with this part on his neck right here just below the ears. So I'm going to go in nice and deep on one side and then nice and deep on the other side, and I want to be in so deep that my fingers can almost touch behind his neck, and I've got this rounded shape with my wrists. Once I got that, I'm going to let the gi slide back through my fingers until I can turn my wrists up, and that looks like this, and I want to push the tops of my wrists into the side of his neck. And then once I have that, I bring him in close and I squeeze. Let's look at it from closed guard. So the first version of this choke, it's the most basic one. Will's already broken down, so his posture's already down. From right here, one hand goes in the collar, just like we saw when we were standing, super deep. This one here, I'm gonna go underneath here. My fingers are almost touching behind the back of his head. Then I let the gi slide through my fingers until I can curl my wrists up. Now from here, I'm gonna bring him in with my knees and squeeze. I get that squeeze by pulling my elbows back and bringing my chest up. The second version of this one, it's the more common type. My partner's got good posture and he's got his arms framed now because he's getting ready to pass my guard. I don't want that to happen. So what's gonna happen from here is I'm gonna break these grips first. It's the first thing you have to deal with. And in order to do that, for now, we're gonna scoop underneath like this. I'm gonna put pressure on the back of his wrists. From here, I get to the inside, I break the grips, bring him forward with my legs. This hand's gonna block the bicep. This one grabs his head. This is the one right here that's gonna keep the posture. So if Will starts to posture back up, I'm gonna let go of the bicep. This hand goes underneath and I put that into the collar, same as I did before. But this hand here, instead of coming back around the front and putting it in the collar, I'm gonna put my thumb right here in the collar, just below his ear. And as he's pulling up, I'm gonna flare my elbow, let him pop his head out. Then I turn my wrist into his neck. I'm using the bottom part of my wrist for this instead of the top, but it's the same effect. I bring him in with my legs, bring up my chest, drive my elbows back, and I get the tap. Now the third version of this is the one you do if the last one doesn't work. So everything's the same. I bring my partner down, control the bicep, control his posture by controlling his head. He postures up. My right hand goes into his right collar. And I'm trying to get this grip right here, but maybe Will starts to block with this arm, or he postures up really fast, okay? But I still got this grip. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep fighting to make it look like I'm going for that collar, and I'm gonna let him defend. Good. Now from here, I'm gonna use my legs to move my head all the way here to the left, and I bring my hand underneath his armpit, and then underneath my own arm right here. So I wanna get in super deep underneath my own arm. And then I stick that hand in the collar, the same configuration that we used when we were standing here. Boom, then I bring him in with my legs, and I get the choke. Just a quick review. Start from closed guard, I break the grips, I bring him in with my legs, block the bicep, control his head. He starts to posture back up, hand goes in the collar. So the first one, I'm gonna go for this grip here. Boom. Then we'll reset, do the same thing, bring him in, control the head, hand goes in the collar. I start to go for this grip. He starts to posture up or control my bicep. So I go underneath, get the far side grip, bring him in, and finish. And you can play those two back and forth off each other. In this video, I'm gonna show you 3 ways to set up an armbar from closed guard. Before we get into the arm bars, we've got to talk about 2 prerequisite movements. The first one looks like this. I need to be able to bring my knees to my chest and drive my feet into the air. So I'm gonna post my hands on the floor here, bring my knees to my chest, pick my tailbone up off the floor, and then shoot my feet up into the air. Okay, from the side. So I need to be able to bring my knees to my chest, Lift my tailbone up off the floor and shoot my feet up into the air. Make sure you don't try to pick your feet up and drive them into the air before bringing your knees to your chest and your tailbone off the floor. You have to do it in this order. Knees to chest, tailbone off the floor, feet into the air. And the other prerequisite movement, once we get that one down, we need to be able to add a twist to the movement. Okay, it looks like this. I'm gonna bring my knees to my chest, my tailbone off the floor, drive my feet into the air, and then I'm gonna twist with my core. It looks like this. And from the side. So I brought my good buddy in Nick to help me out with this move today. The first one is a 3-step armbar, and this is the most basic version of it. It starts off like this. I'm gonna establish 2 grips. I wanna get a pocket grip on his wrist and a deep grip right here on his collar. You guys can do this several different ways. You can pocket grip in line, so my left hand grabs his right wrist, my right hand grabs his right collar, or I can switch it where my right hand grabs his right wrist, my left hand grabs his left collar. Either way is fine. It's different types of control. Play around with both, see which one you like better. The most basic version of this, I have a pocket grip or a pistol grip. I grab the far side collar, and what I'm gonna do from here is I'm gonna clinch in with this leg, my right leg on his hip. I post my right foot on his hip. I'm gonna elevate my hip into the air as high as I can. This foot over here is gonna bite into his back. Then my left leg goes around his head. Now from here, I let his collar go. I'm gonna grab his hand right here below his thumb, pinch my knees together, drop my heels, squeeze my butt, and I wanna make sure that I keep his hand close to my body, and I'm gonna drive my hips forward. Okay, once from this side, pistol grip or a pocket grip, hand in the collar, my foot on his hip right there. This is an important detail. I'm not just posting my foot on his hip, I'm also preventing Nick from driving his hip forward and from pulling his elbow back. My thigh is blocking his elbow from escaping. Now, I keep that nice and tight, bite up high on his back, then release, and finish the arm lock. The second one, and this is a very practical one, it's the 2-step armbar. You're gonna use your leg to block your opponent's shoulder so that they can't stack you, which can sometimes happen with the 3-step armbar that we just looked at. It looks like this. For this one, I'm gonna play around with my opponent's posture as much as I possibly can. So I'm gonna use my legs to bring them forward here. Now the problem with this is my partner's gonna be posting on my hips if they know what they're doing. So if I try to bring him forward with just my legs, he's gonna post his hands and keep good posture, and I'm not gonna be able to bring him forward. I also need to address his grips. So you guys can do a double pocket grip and pull. You can go underneath with your hands and pull. You can do a combination of both and pull. But whatever happens, what you want is the arm you're gonna attack, you want that on the inside of your body. So the version I usually recommend is break their posture down first, allow them a chance to post on your chest to regain their posture, and that's when you attack with the 2-step armbar. It looks like this. Nick's got good posture, his hands are in place. I pull forward with my legs, I break him down, and I control his head here. When he starts to posture up, he starts pushing off right here. This hand's gonna go underneath, and I'm gonna collect the elbow. It looks like this. When I collect the elbow, my thumb goes here in the collar, and I'm gonna shave the guy's head, let his head just pop out to that side. Now from here, keeping the elbow intact, I open my guard and I do that leg lift that we looked at earlier. My knees come to my chest. I drive my tailbone into the air and then my feet into the air. And I get to this locked position here. Now I'm in a secure position. His arms across his body, elbows inside of my hip. And from here, I can push on his face, grab the forearm, collect the arm lock, and finish. From this side, let's look at the roll of this leg. When I break my partner down and bring them in, I'm allowing them enough space to bring their hands to the inside to push off. When he starts pushing off, my thumb goes to the collar, but I keep pressure on the back of their head with this forearm. This hand goes underneath, and I collect the elbow.
Notice I'm bumping my hip out to the side a little bit right here. Now from here, as he postures up, I get to this plie guard position. Now he's in the sweet spot that I want him in. I'm gonna use my legs. This knee turns up, this leg shaves the back of their head. And if I've still got the collar right here, I wanna transfer from the collar to push on their face. Boom, switch to the arm lock and finish the same way I did earlier. Okay, the third one is the one-step armbar. It looks like this. From this position right here, you grab your partner's head, you try to break them down, or if they're postured up here, you pull them into this position here. And when they start to posture up, as they're posturing up, my hand goes underneath, I collect that arm, and I'm gonna do the movement we did earlier. My knees come to my chest, hips leave the floor, feet go in the air, and I put the twist on. And I complete my armbar from here. One more time. I break my partner down, control the back of the head. When they post, this hand goes underneath. I go through the movement we did in the start and complete the armbar in one step. Now from this side, just take a close look at the movement we're doing. Instead of posting on the floor, I'm gonna be latching onto my opponent, so that's gonna be my base. My knees come to my chest, hips leave the floor, feet go in the air, and I put a twist with my legs and hips. Watch.
In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a triangle choke from close guard in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I brought in my student Pat for this. Triangle choke's his choke, but today I'm going to be doing the triangle choke on Pat. We're going to do 3 different types of this, 3 different setups, but the finish of the triangle choke itself is exactly the same. So the first one, triangle choke from close guard. Let's check it out. So the first version of this triangle choke, it's basically me forcing my partner into this position. One thing I need to have happen is my opponent's gonna have one arm inside my guard and the other side out of my guard. And how that gets there, that's where the variation comes in. Let's look at 3 different ways that you could possibly get there. So the first one, I can do a double wrist grab right here. I'm gonna pull my partner towards me by bringing my knees to my chest. And as I'm breaking them down, one arm, I'm gonna punch that into their belt, bring them in towards my chest, and then I open my guard, get my leg over the elbow, then I shoot to this position here to lock it. Once I got this, I can make my partner carry my weight here a little bit, but ultimately what I want is for this arm here to be pushed over to this side. I'm gonna put my arm on top of that. This hand here grabs my shin of the leg behind the back of the neck. And now this foot here is gonna help me make the angle I need. I can either put my foot on his hip or put my foot on the floor, and I wanna move my body until I get an angle on his neck. Then my knee goes up to my ankle. And a couple of things I'm gonna do here with my legs. I'm going to point my toes up in the air, pinch my knees together, grab the back of the head and extend my hips. And I get the choke. Let's look at the lock closely from this side. So from right here, double wrist grab, I pull my partner towards me with my legs and then punch his fist to his belt, and I jump to this locked position. You can keep your feet crossed here, but keep your heels heavy so that your partner can't posture up. So if my partner tries to posture up, I'm gonna shoulder walk away to help break their posture down. Push the arm across, put your hand on top. This hand here grabs my shin, the one behind the back of his head. Now this foot here is free to either post on the hip or post on the floor from here. I'm gonna bump my hip out, create an angle, and I should be able to get my heel to touch my knee. Then I wanna kick high into the sky, clamp down on the back of my ankle, and now my legs are gonna do a couple of things. I'm gonna point my toes up, I'm gonna pinch my knees together. My hands, if I need to, I'm gonna grab the back of his head and squeeze. Let's talk about another way that you could end up in that position. A classic one, and this is a mistake white belts make all the time. They get the concept of opening the guard. So let's just say from here, Pat understands that he's gonna posture up, control my hip, and he's gonna open my guard. But maybe the mistake he makes is he puts his hand to the inside of my leg to open guard. Here, this happens, I wanna be heavy with this heel, so as he can't put my leg up on his shoulder, go ahead, and smash pass from here. So I'm gonna keep this heel heavy, and I wanna control the back of his elbow right here. Once I got that, my foot goes to the hip, I'm gonna ride up super high, then I go to the shoulder,
and then I get back in this position here. If my partner starts to stack me, because he feels like he's almost got that pass right now, so if his hand comes over the top and he starts to stack pass, it's very hard for me to finish triangle from here. So what I want to do is I want to shoulder walk back by pushing on his hip with my left leg here. Then I'm in the same position, grab my shin, bite down, toes up, knees together, and squeeze. Okay, let's look at that one from the other side. So from here, Pat's gonna start passing, making a classic white belt mistake. One hand to the inside, one hand's outside. So I'm gonna go heavy with my leg right here. My hips are off the floor. It's gonna make it really heavy for him to open my leg. This one here, grab the back of his elbow. I'm gonna hold that tight. This foot goes to the hip. I elevate my hip, get it as high as I can. Then I bite down on the back of his head. If he continues to start to stack me here, I'm gonna shoulder walk back. Grab my shin and lock up the triangle. So another way that the triangle choke can pop up is off of a failed armbar. If I'm going for a basic arm lock here on my opponent, I'm clamping down with both my legs here. If Pat is able to free this arm by pulling it straight back, what I don't want to have happen is for him to use that arm, grab my collar on the far side, and smash past me this way, which is what they'd be looking for. So instead, I go for my arm lock. If he can get his arm out, I want to be heavy with this leg. If he starts to smash past me from here, same thing, I'm going to shoulder walk. I bite down with this leg, and then this leg comes back around his head. I cut the angle to the other side and lock up my triangle. From closed guard, this is probably my favorite way to set it up. It's a forced triangle choke, but you do it off of a knee shield, as in like a scissor sweep situation. So it looks like this. So I'm in closed guard. I start to set up my knee shield, but instead of going inside my partner's elbow, from here, if I notice my partner's in nice and tight, so their elbows are in tight to the body, I'm gonna do the same thing, cross collar, wrist grip. I bump my hip out, but this knee comes over the top and I push down on Pat's bicep and I'm gonna stretch him out. My other foot can also post on the front of the hip to keep from getting stacked. Now from here, I'm gonna drive his arm down and then come up to the other side and finish my triangle. It looks like this. Got Pat in my closed guard. From here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna enter into a scissor sweep situation. So I can have double wrists, wrist and collar, whatever, but I'm gonna bump my hip out to the side. Now this knee, I'm gonna use this knee to chuck his arm to the inside. Now from here, I push down on that. My other foot, my left foot goes to his hip. I swing that leg around over the top, and now I enter into my triangle choke. In this video, I'm gonna teach you how to do an omoplata shoulder lock. So if you already know what a Camora is, it's good to keep in mind that an omoplata is very similar to a Camora. Just instead of doing the shoulder lock with your hands, you're gonna do it with your legs. It looks like this. So without any setups or anything like that, so Nick's left arm, for argument's sake, my right leg hits him in the back of the shoulder. I move all the way over to this side here. Nick flattens out. And from flattening Nick out, I sit up, control his elbow, drape my body over his, and then I put him in the shoulder lock. That's the exact same position as the Camora finish. Disclaimer, I don't want you to just go for this lock like this. We gotta talk about setups, but let's look at this now in a second. Just broadly speaking, this is what it looks like. This hand over here gets isolated. My other foot, I'm just using this to bump my hip out. But my right leg, I'm gonna hit him in the armpit with the bottom of my leg. And I want to get my foot past his shoulder right here. Once it's above his shoulder, I can start moving my head towards his feet and flattening Nick out. When I sit up, control the elbow, drape your body over theirs, tuck your feet in behind, and there's your shoulder lock. So let's look at a couple of practical scenarios where you'll have the opportunity to do an omoplata. The first one's simple enough. I'm going for an arm lock, and Nick pulls his arm out. If he's able to pull his arm out, I want to keep my weight down heavy on the back of his head so he's having trouble getting his posture. Then this hand here is going to push on his wrist. I'm going to elevate my hips and push his wrist over towards my right hip. Then I'm going to switch that off to my right hand. Still keeping pressure right here on his head, I'm going to push and get my right leg above his shoulder. Once I've got that position there, foot goes to the floor and I walk out. Keep walking out until I flatten him out, and then sit up, grab their elbow, drape your hip over their hip, tuck your foot in behind so you can push off with this. And I want to concentrate on driving my right hip forward so that his hand gets closer to the back of his head, all while keeping weight on the back of his shoulder. The second scenario is only going to come up if your partner doesn't have discipline with the controlling arm right here when he's passing guard. So if Nick is passing my guard, pushing down on my knee, and his elbow is clear, what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to take this foot and I'm going to put it on his hip, control the guy's wrist, and hit him hard in the back of the armpit with the bottom of my leg. So now we're in a similar position. Base my foot on the floor. I'm going to walk out, pushing heavy with my right leg, sit up, catch the elbow, drape over his hips, and finish the shoulder lock. This is how to do an omoplata if you want to be a bit of a bully about it. So you can force this on somebody. You don't have to wait for them to give you the opportunity. You're going to do that with this grip here. So my right hand makes a pocket grip on his wrist. My left hand grabs his left collar. I'm going to keep biting into him with my right foot, and my hips are off the floor right here. Now my left foot, I'm going to put it right here on his shoulder, and I'm going to push with that. I'm going to push back, and I'm going to pull with this one, loop to this position. Keep this heel down and heavy on the back of the shoulder. When this foot hits the floor, you walk out and push forward. Then sit up, control the elbow, and finish the lock. One thing you gotta watch out for when you're doing this move is Nick has the opportunity, if he can get his hips high and I'm doing this move, he can roll out of this. Boom. And then we're in a situation where we've got a scramble right here. Maybe I'll switch to an arm lock. Maybe he'll come up and get on top. What I want to do there instead is when I'm going for the omoplata, I want to put pressure forward here, but be mindful of this right here. Maybe I'll grab the belt. Maybe I'll grab his far side cuff. Maybe I'll hook the leg right here. But if Nick starts to elevate his hips at all, I want to keep this intact and then concentrate on walking away and flattening them out. Let's just say Nick beat me to the punch. And before I got a chance to control anything right here, he's elevating his hips. What I'm looking to do is this hand goes underneath and I want to hug his leg tight to my body. I'm still putting downward pressure here, but when he drives his hip into the air to roll, I'm going to roll belly down this way towards him. Then I come up to this position here. Now from here you got some options, but the most likely one is pull up on their head, roll this way, and then switch to a triangle choke. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to do a Camora from closed guard. The Camora is a shoulder lock, and the Camora grip itself is one of the most dominant grips you can possibly use in Jiu Jitsu. You can get a lot of control over your opponent with it. So if you can establish the Camora grip position, you're going to hold on to it as tight as you possibly can. You're going to move your body around underneath and around your opponent to get into a position where you can start to apply the proper pressure. It looks like this. You get the closed guard. My opponent has put their hands on the floor right there. Either they did it or I helped them get there in the first place, but this is ultimately where we end up. So what I want to do is I want to get my hand on their wrist. Once I got wrist control here, I'm going to open up my guard. I'm going to bite down with this one right here to keep pressure on his hip. But this foot here, I'm going to put this one on the floor next to his other foot. I'm going to open up my guard. I'm going to come up to my elbow. Now my hand right here, I'm going to come around my partner's elbow. A big mistake I see people make here is it's easy to put the arm in place here, and then they got a bit of a reach right here to get this grip, and then they start pulling back on their partner's shoulder. And if my partner resists at all, it's going to be pretty hard for me to get him to the ground, and his arm is going to be mostly straight. So what I want to do instead is I actually want to go over my partner's elbow and get my grip together. Now when I start to pull back on their arm, I'm going to pull their elbow towards my chest. So this foot, my left foot, is going to push to the floor. This leg right here, my right calf muscle, I'm going to bite that into my partner's hip, and I'm going to drive my head back to the mat. Once I get here, my leg right here, my right leg, I'm going to hook that inside of my partner's guard, and this is going to prevent them from elevating and rolling out of it. And then my other leg, I'm going to switch positions. I'm going to take the same position I just had with my right leg now with my left leg. And then I'm gonna bump my hip out to the right side here. And I'm gonna keep bumping out until I get right here. That's gonna help flatten out my partner. This leg is gonna lose the hook, and I'm gonna lock that over the top of my left leg. And I'm gonna keep my elbows pinned tight to my body. And I'm just gonna adjust my hips from here. So right now, my right shoulder is far away from my partner and my left shoulder is close. So I wanna change that up. I want my shoulders to be perpendicular to the floor. So I'm gonna start to turn towards my partner here and get the Camora. Let's change the angle. From here, my opponent's hands are on the floor. I'm gonna grab their wrist, open my guard, sit up, and this arm goes over their elbow. I get my grips together, pin their elbow tight to my body, and I'm gonna concentrate on putting my left shoulder back on the floor. Here, elbows tight to my body, my right foot hooks their foot, and then my left foot, I'm gonna turn it up and I'm gonna shrimp away to the right side, getting up on my side as much as I can, cross my feet, and I do the lock with my body. So I'm not pushing with my arms, I'm driving with my hip to perform the Camora. Now from the other side, their hands on the floor, I grab their wrist with my hand, open up my guard, sit up and go over their elbow. I drive my left shoulder back, I hook their foot with my right foot, and I bump my hip out to the other side. Now basically, my opponent is no longer lying on top of my torso. They're on the inside of my left thigh, and I want to keep them there. This leg bites the hip, my right leg bites back over the top. I pin my elbows tight to my body. Now from here, I'm just gonna drive this hip and this shoulder towards their head. So there's no pressing with my arms here at all. So if my opponent is bigger and stronger than me and they just start to straighten up their arms, if I'm trying to do this with my arm, they're gonna be able to power their arm straight and escape this move. Whereas if I keep my elbows pinned tight to my body, if they try to power out of this position, their arms bent, I have all the leverage, and then from there, I can finish the Camora.
In this video, I'm gonna show you how to do a guillotine choke from close guard in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I brought in my good buddy, Rob Shandera. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and a brown belt in Judo?
Yep.
A brown belt in Judo too. He's gonna help me demonstrate how to do this move today. Okay, so let's talk about the wrap around the neck for the guillotine choke. Ultimately, what I wanna get is my hand around my opponent's neck. My middle finger is gonna grip the curve of my wrist right here. I'm gonna pinch in and pull up. And I wanna make this hole right here where my partner's neck is as small and as tight as possible. When I've got Rob in the mix here, he's in this position here. My armpit is on the back of his neck. I wrap my arm around his neck. This hand here comes in through the other side. And like I showed you earlier, my middle finger on this hand, my right hand, grips the curve of my wrist in my left hand. I'm gonna pinch through and pull up from here. Now this is snug around Rob's neck, but Rob, you're still able to speak, right?
Yes, sir.
From here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk my feet forward and drive my hips as I look up at the roof. Let's look at it from the other side. Rob's in this position. My armpit goes to the back of his neck. My hand wraps around his neck, nice and snug. This one here, I fish it in through right here. My right middle finger grasps the curve of my left wrist. Now from here, I'm gonna pull in and pull up. Rob should still be able to talk, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now I walk my feet in, drive my hips forward and look up and get the tap. Okay, let's look at this from close guard. So I need a reaction out of Rob. And the reaction I need is for him to pull back first and then come forward again. Right now, my hips are on the floor. He's higher than me, so I can't just sit up here and expect to get a guillotine choke. He's gonna post with his hands. He's gonna keep his frame back. It's really hard to get a guillotine from here. So instead, I'm gonna set this up like this. I'm gonna pick at his neck a little bit. I'm gonna try to set up a cross choke. And what I want from Rob is resistance. When he starts to pull back, I come up to my elbow in my hand, open up like I'm gonna go for a hip bump sweep, but Rob isn't gonna let me do that. So what I'm looking for, his reaction, is to try to knock me back down to the mat. So again, we're in close guard position, and I'm gonna start messing with his neck
getting him worried about the choke. Then I'm gonna let him pull back, come up to my elbow, come up to my hand, start to go for the hip bump sweep. But when I feel like he braces and he's starting to tackle me back to the floor, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna continue posting off my right hand and my right foot, and I'm gonna push off my right foot and shoot my hips back past my hand. That creates all kinds of space right here, and it extends Rob forward. Now I just do what I did on my feet. Armpit to the back of the neck, wrap. This hand connects with my left wrist. Now from here, I don't just want to roll back, because if I roll back, Rob can walk over my guard and get me in side control. Instead, what I want to do is I want to clamp my feet here, pinch Rob, and I'm going to pull my hips forward to get underneath him again. Then I close my guard above his hips. Rob can still talk from here, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now from here, pinch in and up, but I stretch my legs and get the tap. Okay, let's look at it from the other side. So I've got Rob in closed guard. I need a reaction out of him. So I'm gonna start to pull him forward with my legs and start to mess with his collar like I'm gonna choke. He pulls back. So from here, I come up to my elbow, come up to my hand, and I start to go for that hip bump sweep. Rob is pushing me back to the floor. Now here's the part I was talking about. This foot, my left foot, I'm gonna push off of that. I'm gonna shoot my hips back past my hand. I don't wanna lean back when I do this. I wanna lean forward. I wanna drape myself over Rob's head. Now my armpit's on the back of his head. I wrap his neck. Right hand grabs my left wrist. I pull through and I pinch up. Make sure my partner can still talk.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now from here, heels, I pull my hips forward, get underneath my partner, and I stretch my legs out. An important safety tip to note, I don't want to turn this into a neck crank. A lot of clubs don't want to teach guillotine chokes to white belts, and most clubs don't teach guillotine chokes to juniors, and it's because it's easily turned into a neck crank, so we want to avoid it. I'm going to show you how a neck crank happens and then how to avoid it. First, let's look at it from standing. So I've got Rob in a guillotine choke, and we're going to change the angle here just so you can see his spine. Right now his spine is straight and it's in line with the back of his head. This turns into a neck crank when I start turning this way. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm driving my hip forward and I'm turning in this direction. Instead of the choke, I still might get the choke, but I'm putting a neck crank in as well. It's easy to damage your partner's neck, hurt your training partner with this move, so you want to avoid that. Instead, I want to concentrate on keeping his head in line with his spine. So instead of twisting here with my hips, I'm going to keep everything straight, walk forward, and just perform the choke. Let's look at how this turns into a neck crank from closed guard and how to avoid it. So to avoid a neck crank in this position from closed guard, I do the same thing. I keep it tight. I bring my hips forward. I get in underneath, but instead of twisting here, putting pressure on my partner's neck, I'm going to keep everything straight, keep my back straight, and just stretch my legs out. Pure choke. So I just want to reiterate that the most important training tool we have as a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu practitioner or as a martial art practitioner in general is our training partners. Myself and Rob have been training together since the early 1990s. We started in karate together at my father's dojo, then kickboxing, and in the last 2 decades it's been judo and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu mostly. Over 3 decades, I've got to be honest, we've given each other some bumps and bruises, but never seriously injured each other. If you go into practice with your partner's best interests in mind and they have your best interests in mind, then both of you can grow together by helping each other improve. Thanks again for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I'm Michael Foley, and I'll see you on the mats.